Someone gives you advice today. Maybe a friend, maybe a parent. They speak with quiet certainty. They have been here before, they say. They know how this goes. And something in you relaxes a little. It is good to be near someone who seems sure. But later, alone, you notice a small doubt. Not about them exactly, about the certainty itself, about how easily it settled over the room, about whether knowing something and feeling like you know it are quite the same thing. Most of us have been on both sides of that moment. We have received the confident answer, and we have given one. We rarely stop to ask what wisdom actually is. We just recognize the feeling of being close to it or far from it. We treat it like warmth, something you either sense or you don't. And then there is Socrates. He lived in Athens over 2,000 years ago. The city was full of clever, accomplished people. Poets, generals, politicians, men who had built things and won things and explained things. Athens looked at all of them, and at him, and called him the wisest. He spent the rest of his life disagreeing. Not out of false modesty. He meant it completely. He said he knew nothing, and he also accepted that he was the wisest man in the city. Both things fully true at the same time. Athens around 430 BC, a city of maybe 300,000 people, busy, loud, confident, a city that believed in its own intelligence. Somewhere in that city, a man named Socrates is walking. He is not young. He is not rich. He is famously ugly by his own account, flat-nosed, heavy, not the image of a Greek hero. But people gather around him. They always do. Then a friend travels to Delphi, to the great oracle, and he asks the oracle a question. Is there anyone wiser than Socrates? The oracle says no. That answer lands like a stone in still water, and it does not stop rippling for the rest of Socrates' life. Think about what that moment requires of him. He cannot ignore it. The oracle does not make small talk. To dismiss the pronouncement would be its own kind of arrogance. But to accept it, to simply nod and say, yes, I am the wisest, that feels wrong to him too. Deeply wrong. Because Socrates knows more clearly than anything else he knows that he does not know very much at all. So he does the only thing he can think to do. He goes looking for someone wiser than himself to prove the oracle wrong. Now, before we follow him into those conversations, stay here for a moment. You know this situation, not from ancient Athens, from your own life. Someone hands you a proposal, a plan, something inside your professional world, your area of experience. You read it, and almost immediately you feel the reactions forming. This part is good. This part won't work. This assumption is wrong. You feel certain. But before you open your mouth, ask yourself something honestly. Can you actually trace the reasoning behind each of those reactions? Can you follow the thread all the way back? Or are some of them, maybe most of them, simply the weight of habit? Years of repetition dressed up as judgment, assumption wearing the coat of expertise. Sit with that, really sit with it. Most of us, if we're honest, find something uncomfortable there. A gap between how certain we feel and how well we can actually account for that certainty. That gap is exactly what Socrates found, over and over again. He went to the politicians first, men of enormous reputation, men who governed the city, and he talked with them carefully, patiently. He asked them to trace their reasoning, to follow the thread. They could not do it. They knew the conclusions. They had always known the conclusions, but the foundations were not there, or if they were, no one had ever looked at them.
I myself know nothing, except just a little, enough to extract an argument from another man who is wise, and to receive it fairly.
He says it plainly, and he means it plainly. But here is the thing that will not let go of you once you see it. The man who said he knew nothing was the man the oracle called wisest. Not despite that admission, perhaps because of it. And that is where the real question begins, not as a riddle, as a demand. If wisdom starts with admitting you do not have it, what does that cost a person who is already sure that they do? Think of something you are certain about, not a fact you looked up, something deeper than that, a belief about people maybe, how they behave when no one is watching, what loyalty really means, what hard work actually gets you. You have held it for years. It has never really been tested because it has never needed to be. It just seems true. Now try something, try to trace it back. Where did it come from? What would someone need to show you? What would they need to say or do or prove for you to let it go? Take a moment with that, because here is the harder question. If you search for that answer and find nothing, if you notice that there is actually nothing that could dislodge it, what is that? Is that wisdom? Or is it something else, sitting very comfortably in wisdom's chair? This is the question Socrates spent his life pressing on, and it made him one of the most unsettling people in the history of Athens, not because he was angry, not because he was cruel, but because he was genuinely curious. He would walk up to a man who was respected, a general, a poet, a statesman, someone whose confidence had been tested by decades of real work in the world, and he would ask a simple question: what is courage? What is justice? What makes a good life? And the conversation would go well at first. The man would answer. He had thought about this, he knew. And then Socrates would ask another question and another. And somewhere in the middle, quietly, the answer would begin to come apart. Not because Socrates had a better answer. He never offered one. It was the questions themselves that did the work. They revealed that the belief, the one held for years, the one that seemed obviously true, had never really been examined at all. It had just been assumed. Now here is where it gets strange. The oracle at Delphi, the most respected voice in the ancient world, had declared Socrates the wisest man in Athens. Socrates heard this and did not celebrate. He was baffled. He went around the city trying to prove it wrong. He found men who seemed wiser. He talked to them, and he kept discovering the same thing. They believed they knew, and they did not. Socrates at least knew that he did not know. That, he concluded, was the only difference. That small, strange gap between the man who does not know and admits it, and the man who does not know and doesn't, that was wisdom, or the beginning of it.
Anyone who holds a true opinion without understanding is like a blind man on the right road.
A blind man on the right road. He gets where he is going. He cannot tell you why. He cannot correct his course if something changes. He cannot help anyone else find the way. The destination is not the point. The point is whether you can see. And this is the paradox at the very heart of Socrates. He was called wise precisely because he refused to call himself wise. The admission was not modesty. It was not a posture. It was the thing itself. The moment you believe you have arrived at wisdom, you have stopped moving toward it. The certainty closes the door. And so Socrates kept the door open his entire life, kept asking, kept pulling on the thread, not to arrive anywhere, but because the pulling was the only honest thing to do. Athens made him its wisest citizen for this. And then, eventually, it killed him for it. That tension never resolved. It wasn't meant to. Think of something you know, not a fact you looked up, something you learned by living. Maybe it is about trust, who to give it to, when to hold back. Maybe it is about grief or ambition or how to talk to someone who is afraid. You have lived enough to have a few of these. You would pass them on. You believe them the way you believe the ground is under your feet. Now try to explain one, not as a rule, as a reason. Why is it true? Not always, but in general, why? And when is it not true? Who is the exception and what makes them the exception? If someone younger pushed back and said, "What do you actually mean by that?" what would you say next? Sit with that for a moment. Most people, when they push on a conviction they are proud of, find something unexpected. The words start to blur, the edges get soft, and then comes a sentence that ends a conversation rather than opening one. Something like, "I just know it from experience." You will understand when you are older. It is hard to put into words. Socrates heard sentences like that every day. Athens was full of people who knew things, poets who had written lines that moved thousands, generals who had won battles, craftsmen who could build what others only imagined. He went to them. He asked, not to embarrass them. He genuinely wanted to find someone who could show him what wisdom looked like from the inside. What he found again and again was a particular kind of wall. The person could tell him the what. They could not tell him the why that went all the way down. And the moment he asked a second question, or a third, something shifted. The conviction was still there, but the ground beneath it was not.
Anyone who holds a true opinion without understanding is like a blind man on the right road.
The blind man is on the right road. That matters. He is not lost. He is not wrong. He might even arrive before you do, but he cannot tell you why he took the left turn back there. He cannot help you when the road splits again. And he does not know, this is the quiet part, he does not know that he cannot see. That is what Socrates kept finding. Not stupidity, not dishonesty, something more unsettling. People who had the right answers and the wrong reasons and who had stopped noticing the difference. They had lived long enough to be correct about many things, and that correctness had hardened into certainty, and that certainty had closed the door. So go back to your conviction, the one you would pass on. You are standing at the edge of it now. You have pushed on it a little. What did you find? If you can follow it all the way to its edges, see where it holds and where it breaks, that is something. That is the beginning of a kind of knowledge worth the name. But if you found yourself reaching for the words and then letting go, if it dissolved a little when you pressed, that is worth noticing too. Not because you are wrong. You may be entirely right. But there is a difference between being on the road and being able to see the road. And Socrates spent his life insisting that most of us are doing the first, while believing we are doing the second. He thought he was too. That is where the whole thing starts. Here is the hardest thing anyone ever said to Socrates. Not a philosophical objection. A human one. You walk around asking your questions. You unravel what people believe. And then you leave. You go home. They are the ones who have to live inside the wreckage. His critics in Athens put it plainly. What you call wisdom looks, from the outside, a great deal like cruelty with good manners. Think about someone you love, not a stranger, someone whose face you know. And they hold a belief not about politics, not about something small about themselves, about what they deserve, about what is still possible for them. And you can see clearly that the belief is wrong. It is holding them in place. It is also just possibly holding them together. You have the questions. You know how to ask them gently. You could walk that person slowly to the moment where they see the contradiction themselves. Do you do it? Take a moment. Answer honestly. Most of us hesitate, and we call that love. We say we are protecting them, but sit with it a little longer. Are you protecting them? Or are you protecting yourself from the responsibility of what might happen next? Because the questioning might not resolve into clarity. It might dissolve the very thing they were using to stay upright. And then what? You ask the question. You have to be there for the answer. That is not a small thing to sign up for. This is the objection at its sharpest. Socratic questioning is not neutral. It is not just a method. It is an act. And acts have consequences. A man who questions everything, his critics said, is a man who takes no responsibility for what falls apart. He calls it philosophy. They called it damage done at a safe distance. Socrates did not run from this. He leaned into it. He said the unexamined life causes damage too, quiet damage, slow damage, the kind that never announces itself. A person who holds a false belief about what they deserve will make decision after decision from that false place. The harm is real. It is just invisible. And choosing not to ask the question does not make you innocent. It makes you complicit in a different way.
It would be better for me that multitudes of men should disagree with me rather than that I, being one, should be out of harmony with myself.
He is not talking about stubbornness. He is talking about the cost of self-deception. The belief you protect in yourself or in someone you love does not stay still. It spreads. It shapes how you move through the world. Letting it stand unchallenged is its own kind of choice. And Socrates would say you are responsible for that choice too. But notice, he does not make this easy. He does not promise the questioning leads somewhere good. He only insists that not questioning leads somewhere worse. That is not comfort. That is a demand. The wisest man in Athens, who claimed to know nothing, is asking you to do the hardest thing, to ask, to stay, and to bear whatever the answer turns out to be. Here is something to sit with before we finish. Think of one thing you know about yourself that you would call wisdom, not a fact you learned from a book, something harder than that, something you earned. An understanding about who you are, about what you can trust in yourself, about how the world actually works. You have one, most of us do, we carry it quietly. It feels solid. It feels true. Now ask yourself one question. When did you last genuinely test it? Not in the way we sometimes do, running it past a friend who already agrees with us, or holding it up briefly before nodding and putting it back. I mean really test it. When did you last sit with the real possibility that it might be wrong? Not as a game, as a real opening. If the answer comes easily, good. If it does not come at all, that is where Socrates would have leaned forward. Because that is what he did. He did not teach. He did not stand at the front and explain. He walked up to people who felt certain and he asked them to say what they meant. That was all, just say it plainly. And they would begin to speak, and somewhere in the speaking, the certainty would start to shift. Not because Socrates was cleverer than them, because the certainty had never been tested. It had only been held. There is a difference between holding a belief and knowing it. Socrates spent his whole life pointing at that gap. He called it the most dangerous gap in a human life, and he died for pointing at it, which tells you something about how much people do not want the gap pointed at. Think again about that hard-won thing you carry, the wisdom about yourself. Ask, what would it cost you if it were wrong, really cost you, not in argument in life, in the choices you have already made, in the story you tell about who you are. That cost is real. And here is what Socrates understood that almost no one else has. The size of that cost is exactly why the question has to be asked. Not in spite of it, because of it. The more it costs, the more it matters. The more it matters, the more dangerous it is to leave it unexamined. Athens called him wise. He said he knew nothing. He meant both things completely. The wisdom was not a store of answers he had accumulated over the years. It was a practice, a willingness to return to the question, again and again, even when it was uncomfortable, especially then. He did not arrive at certainty late in life and rest in it. He kept walking. He kept asking, right up until the morning they handed him the cup.
O dear Pan, and all the other gods of this place, grant that I may be beautiful inside. Let all my external possessions be in friendly harmony with what is within. May I consider the wise man rich. As for gold, let me have as much as a moderate man could bear and carry with him.
That is not the prayer of a man who has finished. That is the prayer of a man who is still asking, still wanting the inside to be worthy of inspection, still aware that it might not be. That awareness, held all the way to the end, might be the whole thing, not an answer you reach, a question you keep choosing to live inside. So the question we leave here is not really about Socrates. It is about you and about that solid thing you carry. If the beginning of wisdom is the admission that you do not have it, what does that demand of a person who already believes they do? There is something that stays with you about Socrates. Not the ideas exactly, not the arguments, something more like a posture. The way a man can stand in a crowded marketplace and genuinely not know, and find that not knowing to be the most honest thing available to him. Athens called him their wisest. He called himself ignorant. And here is what is strange. He was not being modest. He was not performing humility for an audience. He had simply looked carefully at what he actually possessed and found it thinner than people assumed. Those two things were both true at once. The wisest man in the city, the man who knew nothing. Athens never quite resolved that. Neither did he. He just kept living inside the tension of it every day until the day they made him drink the hemlock. Most of us do not do that. Most of us arrive at a point somewhere in our 30s or 40s or maybe earlier where we quietly decide we have things figured out. Not everything, but enough. The important things. We have earned our opinions. We have lived long enough to know what kind of person we are. And that decision, small and almost invisible, is where something stops. Not knowledge. You can still learn facts, still gather information, but something else stops, some quality of attention, some willingness to be genuinely surprised by yourself. Socrates never let that stop. That is the thing. Every morning of his life, apparently, was still open. You do not have to admire that. It is genuinely inconvenient. It costs something real. But there is a question underneath all of this that he never answered, because it was not his to answer. It is yours. And you probably already know what it is. You are thinking of it right now.